If you are over 65, there is a real chance you are still paying full price on bills that the law no longer requires you to pay in full, and in some cases, not at all. Not because anyone is hiding this from you on purpose, but because none of these programs apply automatically. You have to know they exist and you have to ask. I am Margaret Wells, and in this video, I am walking you through 6 bills where seniors are frequently entitled to a reduction or a full exemption once they turn 65, what the actual rule behind each one is, and exactly how you go about claiming it where you live. Before we get into the first one, if this is your first time here, consider subscribing because every week I go through one part of the financial system that affects people in retirement, explained in plain language with no products to sell and nothing complicated about it. I'm not going to waste your time with vague tips that sound good but don't tell you anything you can actually act on. Every single one of these 6 has a real name, a real agency or office behind it, and a real way to apply. So let's get into the first one. The first one, and probably the one with the biggest dollar impact for most people, is property tax. Most states in the country have some version of a senior property tax exemption, a senior freeze, or a senior credit, and the difference between those 3 terms actually matters. So let's slow down on it for a moment. An exemption usually means a portion of your home's assessed value is no longer taxed at all, which lowers your bill directly every year for as long as you stay enrolled. A freeze means your property's assessed value gets locked at whatever it was when you applied. So even if home values in your area keep climbing every year, your tax bill based on that value stays where it was when you qualified, which matters a lot in areas where property values have risen quickly over the past several years. A credit is a little different again. It's not a reduction in the tax itself. It's money that gets refunded to you or applied to offset what you already paid, sometimes showing up as a check, sometimes as a deduction on the following year's bill. Some states only offer one of these 3, some offer 2, and a handful offer all 3 depending on the county you live in. Since property tax in the United States is largely administered at the county level rather than the state level, which is part of why the rules can feel so inconsistent from one place to the next. What almost all of these programs have in common is an age requirement, usually 65, though some counties set it at 62 or even lower for certain disability-related versions of the same program. There's typically also an income limit, which varies a lot. Some counties set it fairly high so that most retirees qualify. Others set it lower and target the benefit more narrowly toward people on a fixed and modest income. And there's almost always a requirement that the home is your primary residence, meaning a rental property or a vacation home you own won't qualify, only the place you actually live. Picture 2 neighbors living on the same street, both over 65, both with homes of similar value. One of them filed for the senior exemption the year they turned 65 and has been paying a noticeably lower property tax bill every single year since. The other never filed either because they didn't know the program existed or because they assumed it would be handled automatically by the county. Both of them are equally eligible. The only difference between their 2 tax bills is a single form that one of them filled out and the other didn't. That gap, multiplied across years, is often the largest single dollar amount on this entire list, which is exactly why I wanted to start with it rather than save it for later in the video. Here's the part that surprises people the most, and I want to say this clearly because it's the single biggest reason people miss out on this one. In most states, none of this happens automatically just because you turned 65. Your county assessor's office does not know your age unless you tell them. There's no birthday notification that goes out, no automatic adjustment that kicks in. You have to file an application, usually just once, though some counties require you to renew it every few years to confirm you still live there and still qualify based on income. The deadline is often earlier in the year than people expect, sometimes months before the actual tax bill even arrives in your mailbox, which means by the time you're looking at a bill and thinking, this seems like a lot, the window to apply for that tax year may have already closed. If you've been paying full property tax since you turned 65 and never filed anything for this, here's the good news. In most counties, you can still apply right now and start saving going forward from the next tax cycle. And in a smaller number of states, there are provisions that allow you to apply for a partial refund covering one or more recent years if you miss the original window, though this varies enough by location that I'd encourage you to ask directly rather than assume either way. The way to find out exactly what applies to you is to search your county name along with the words Senior Property Tax Exemption, or simply call your local county assessor's office directly and ask them what senior programs exist, what the income limit is for the current year, and what the application deadline looks like. These offices field this exact question regularly, so you won't be the first person asking, and the call itself usually only takes a few minutes. There are a few common mistakes I see come up around this one specifically, and it's worth naming them so you don't fall into the same gaps. The first is assuming you don't qualify because your income feels too high, when in reality, a lot of these income limits are higher than people guess, sometimes calculated only on certain types of income rather than your full household income. So it's worth checking the actual number rather than assuming you're over it. The second is forgetting to reapply if your county requires periodic renewal, which means someone who applied at 65 and qualified can quietly lose the benefit a few years later simply because a renewal form went unanswered, not because they stopped qualifying. The third, and this one matters a great deal for couples, is what happens to the exemption if one spouse passes away. In many counties, a surviving spouse can keep the exemption even if they're younger than the original qualifying age, but only if they apply to transfer it. It doesn't carry over automatically just because it was already in place. If you're recently widowed or supporting a parent who is, this is one worth checking specifically rather than assuming the exemption is simply lost. The second one is state income tax on your Social Security and retirement income, and this one trips people up because the rules genuinely differ depending on where you live, more so than almost anything else on this list. At the federal level, your Social Security benefit can be partially taxable depending on your overall combined income, and that part of the equation doesn't change no matter what state you live in. It's set by federal law. But at the state level, it's a completely different picture. The majority of states do not tax Social Security benefits at all, full stop, regardless of how much other income you have. A smaller group of states do tax it to some degree, but even within that group, most offer exemptions or income thresholds that mean a large share of retirees living there still end up owing little or nothing on it once those thresholds are applied. And then there's a separate question entirely, which is whether your state taxes other forms of retirement income, pensions, withdrawals from a 401k, distributions from a traditional IRA, because some states that leave Social Security alone still tax those other income sources, and some states exempt all retirement income across the board, regardless of source. If you've recently retired or you're getting close to it, this is genuinely worth checking specifically for your own state rather than assuming, because I see people make real decisions about where to retire, about where to maintain their legal residence, based on outdated information about a state's tax rules that may no longer be accurate. State tax codes get revised more often than most people realize, sometimes phased in gradually over several years rather than all at once, which makes it easy to be working off information that was true a few years ago but isn't true anymore. The way to check this accurately for your own situation is to search your state's Department of Revenue website along with the words taxation of retirement income, and make sure whatever you're reading is dated for the current tax year, because several states have phased out taxes on retirement income gradually over recent years, moving the exemption threshold up a little each year until it eventually covers everyone. This is also a good moment to clear up some confusion around the federal side of this, since I get versions of this question often enough that it's worth addressing directly. Whether your Social Security is taxable federally depends on what's called your combined income, which is your adjusted gross income, plus any non-taxable interest you earn, plus half of your Social Security benefit for the year. If that combined number falls under a certain threshold, none of your benefit is federally taxable at all. Above that, a portion becomes taxable, and above a higher threshold, a larger portion becomes taxable. But importantly, it's never the case that your entire Social Security check becomes taxable. There's a cap on the percentage that can ever be subject to tax, no matter how high your other income is. This federal calculation is separate from whatever your state does, which is why it's worth treating them as two different questions, rather than assuming if one is true, the other automatically is too. If this is the part of the system that feels the most confusing to you, you're not alone, it trips up a lot of people, and it might be worth its own video down the line if enough of you are interested. While we're on the subject of money that might be sitting on the table without you realizing it, if you're finding this useful so far, go ahead and drop a comment letting me know which state you're watching from, because I actually read through these, and it helps me know which states to dig into more specifically in future videos, since I know a lot of you are watching from different parts of the country with very different rules. All right, let's keep moving, because the next one is one that a lot of people don't even think to check. The third bill is your utility bill, specifically electricity, gas, and in some areas, water. And the assistance here comes in a few different forms depending on your specific utility provider and your state. Many utility companies run what's often called a senior discount rate or a low-income senior assistance program, separate from the general low-income programs that are open to any age group. These can take the form of a flat percentage reduction applied to your monthly bill, a fixed dollar credit applied automatically once you're enrolled, or in some cases, being moved into an entirely different, lower pricing tier than what you were on before. On top of whatever your individual utility company offers, there's also a federal program called LIHEAP, the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, which helps cover heating and cooling costs and gives priority consideration to households that include someone over 60 or 65, alongside households with young children or a person with a disability. LIHEAP isn't run directly by the federal government. It's distributed through your individual state, which means the application process, the specific income limits, and even the name the program goes by locally can differ quite a bit depending on where you live. Some states fold it into a broader energy assistance office. Others run it through a network of local community action agencies. Some states also run separate water utility assistance programs, since water service often isn't covered under LIHEAP at all. That one's worth checking independently if your water bill has been climbing. The pattern here is the same one we've already seen twice now, and you'll notice it again before this video is over. None of this shows up automatically on your bill just because you crossed a certain age. You have to apply, usually through either your utility provider directly or through your state's Department of Human Services, or through a local community action agency that handles applications on the state's behalf. If you've never looked into this before, a simple first step is calling your utility company's customer service line and asking directly, do you have a senior or low-income assistance program, and what's the income limit to qualify this year? Frontline representatives deal with this question often enough that they usually know the answer immediately, and most utility companies would rather enroll you in an assistance program than have you fall behind on payments. So there's no resistance on their end to having this conversation. There's also a related program worth knowing about that often gets bundled together with LIHEAP at the state level, called the Weatherization Assistance Program. Rather than helping pay an existing bill, this one helps cover the cost of actually making your home more energy efficient. Things like insulation, sealing drafts, or repairing an aging furnace, which in turn lowers what you owe every single month going forward, rather than just covering a one-time cost. It tends to use similar income guidelines to LIHEAP, and in many states, applying for one naturally puts you in contact with information about the other, so it's worth asking about both in the same phone call rather than treating them as two separate errands. The fourth one is smaller individually than the first three, but it adds up over the years, and that's your vehicle registration fee. A number of states offer a reduced registration fee for drivers over 65, and in some states, there's a separate reduced or waived fee specifically tied to senior driver's license renewals as well, distinct from the registration fee itself. The reasoning and structure behind these programs varies quite a bit from state to state. Some tie the discount to age alone, no income test involved at all. Others tie it to a combination of age and income, similar to the property tax programs we already talked about. Some states only apply the discount to one vehicle per household rather than to every vehicle you happen to own, which is worth knowing if you and a spouse each have a car registered in your name. The amount saved per year here is usually modest compared to property tax savings, often somewhere between a small percentage off the standard fee and a flat dollar reduction, depending on the state you're in. But here's why I still think it's worth mentioning on this list. Unlike property tax or utility assistance, this one is sometimes applied automatically at renewal time once your date of birth is already on file with the DMV, which makes it one of the easier items on this entire list to check. You may already be receiving this discount without ever realizing it, or you may find out that you need to specifically request the senior rate the next time you renew rather than it being applied for you. Either way, it usually only takes about 5 minutes on your state DMV's website or a short phone call to find out whether this applies where you live and whether you're currently getting it on your existing registration. It's also worth asking, while you have someone from the DMV on the phone anyway, whether your state offers a reduced fee or simplified renewal process tied specifically to age for your driver's license itself, separate from vehicle registration. Some states extend the renewal period for older drivers, meaning you renew less frequently, while others actually shorten it and require more frequent vision testing. So the rules genuinely run in different directions depending on where you live, which is exactly why it's worth a direct question rather than assuming either way based on what a friend in another state told you. The fifth one is your phone and internet bill, and this is one that genuinely surprises a lot of people because they tend to assume programs like this only exist for much younger working age households, not for people in retirement. There's a federal program called Lifeline that provides a discount on monthly phone or internet service for income-eligible households, and seniors living primarily on Social Security or a modest fixed income often qualify based on income alone, completely separate from age as a factor. Lifeline isn't administered by one single company. It's offered through participating phone and internet providers within your state. And depending on where you live, some providers apply the Lifeline discount toward a phone plan, others toward a home internet plan, and in some areas toward a bundled plan that covers both at once. The income thresholds used to determine eligibility are usually tied to a percentage of the federal poverty guidelines, which adjust slightly most years. And in many cases, you can qualify automatically if you're already enrolled in certain other assistance programs without needing to separately prove your income all over again. Beyond the federal Lifeline program, some individual internet providers run their own senior or low-income internet programs entirely separate from Lifeline, with their own names and their own slightly different rules. So it's genuinely worth checking both your state's Lifeline program and your specific internet provider's own website directly, because you may end up qualifying for one even if you don't qualify for the other. And in some cases, you may be able to combine savings from both. One detail that trips people up is that Lifeline is generally limited to one discount per household rather than per person. So if you're sharing a residence with another adult who's already enrolled, you typically can't both claim a separate Lifeline discount on separate lines under the same roof. It's also worth knowing that switching providers doesn't mean starting over from scratch. In most cases, your Lifeline eligibility is tied to you as a qualifying consumer, not permanently locked to a single company. So if your current provider doesn't offer a plan that works well for you, you can generally transfer your Lifeline benefit to a different participating provider rather than losing it entirely. If you've made it this far into the video, I want to take 10 seconds to actually say thank you because I know this is a lot of detail, section by section, and I genuinely rather give you something specific you can use this week than rush through 6 vague tips that sound nice but don't actually tell you anything actionable. If you found even one of these 5 so far useful, hitting subscribe genuinely helps me keep making videos like this one, going deep into the actual rule behind each topic instead of just skimming past the surface of it the way a lot of channels do. Now, the 6th one is the one I think gets missed the most out of everything on this list. And for the people who do qualify, it can be worth more per year than almost everything else we've covered combined. The 6th bill is your Medicare Part B premium, and most people don't even realize this is something that can be reduced because Medicare premiums tend to get talked about as though they're a fixed cost that everyone pays the exact same amount for, no exceptions. For most people, that assumption is true. The standard Part B premium gets deducted from your Social Security check every month without much thought given to it. But there's a set of programs called Medicare Savings Programs, administered at the state level, even though Medicare itself is a federal program. And these can cover part or all of your Part B premium if your income and your countable savings fall under certain limits set for your state. There are a few different tiers within these programs depending on where you live and your exact income level, and depending on which tier you end up qualifying for, the benefit can range anywhere from simply having your monthly Part B premium covered for you all the way up to also receiving help with deductibles and co-payments on top of the premium itself. Separately from Medicare Savings Programs, there's another program often referred to as Extra Help, which specifically assists with the cost of Medicare Part D prescription drug coverage, the premiums, the deductibles, and the co-pays that come with it, aimed at people with limited income and limited resources. A lot of people assume programs like these are only available to people already on full Medicaid, but that's not accurate. You can qualify for Medicare Savings Programs and for extra help with income that's often modestly above what most people assume the cutoff would be. And the specific income and asset limits get reviewed and adjusted periodically, which means even if you checked a few years ago and didn't qualify at the time, it's genuinely worth checking again now since the threshold may have moved since then. The way to find out where you actually stand is to contact your state health insurance assistance program, often referred to by the acronym SHIP, which exists specifically to help people navigate exactly this kind of question, completely free of charge, with no sales pitch attached to it at all, since SHIP counselors don't sell insurance products. Alternatively, you can call Social Security directly and ask specifically about Medicare Savings Program eligibility and extra help eligibility, and they can walk you through the next steps for your state. To give you a slightly clearer picture of how these tiers generally work without getting lost in technical names, the programs are usually structured so that the lowest income tier covers your Part B premium along with deductibles and co-payments. The next tier up covers just the Part B premium itself, and a tier above that may offer a partial premium contribution. Which tier you fall into depends on where your income and resources land relative to your state's specific limits for that year, and those limits typically get reviewed annually, which is exactly why checking again periodically matters, even if your situation hasn't changed much, because the threshold itself may have moved even if your income hasn't. So that's all 6. Property tax exemptions, freezes, or credits depending on your county. State tax treatment of your Social Security benefit and your other retirement income. Utility assistance through both your individual provider and the federal LIHEAP program. Reduced vehicle registration fees through your state DMV. Lifeline phone and internet assistance for qualifying households. And Medicare Savings Programs, along with extra help to bring down what you're paying for Part B and your prescription coverage. None of these 6 apply to absolutely everyone automatically, and I want to be straightforward with you about that rather than overpromise, because the exact income limits, the savings amount, and in some cases, whether the program even exists at all, depends heavily on your state and sometimes on your specific county within that state. What I'd encourage you to do with this video is simple. Pick the 1 or 2 items from this list that seem most likely to actually apply to your situation and make the call or fill out the application this week while it's fresh in your mind rather than letting it sit on a mental list of things to look into eventually. every single one of these six requires you to take the first step yourself. None of them show up on your bill just because you crossed a certain birthday. And that's exactly why so many people who qualify never end up claiming them. I also want to be honest with you about something before we wrap up, because I think it matters more than another flashy promise would. I can't tell you the exact dollar amount you personally will save from any of these six because it genuinely depends on your state, your county, your income, and your specific situation. And anyone who tells you a single guaranteed number that applies to everyone watching is rounding off details that actually matter for your case. What I can tell you is that for the people who do qualify, several of these add up to real, recurring savings month after month, year after year, not a one-time check that comes and goes. That's exactly why it's worth the phone call, even if you're not sure yet whether you'll qualify. The worst outcome of asking is that you find out you don't, and the best outcome is that you start saving starting with your very next bill. I'm genuinely curious how many of these six you already knew about before watching this, and how many were completely new to you. So let me know down in the comments because it actually helps me figure out what to dig into next. And I read through them. If you're not sure where to start with any of these six, drop a comment with your state and which one you're trying to figure out, and I'll do my best to point you toward the right office or program to call. And if there's someone in your life, a parent, a neighbor, a friend who's over 65 and could benefit from even one of these six, consider sending them this video directly, because more often than not, the only difference between someone claiming one of these and someone missing out on it for years is whether somebody sent them the information at the right time. I'm Margaret Wells, and if you'd like me to go even deeper on any one of these six in a future video, including more state-specific detail, walking through an actual application step by step, or covering programs I didn't have time to fit into this one, let me know which one in the comments and I'll put it together for next week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.